Imagine being trapped in a room where, escape is physically impossible, you can't fight back, and you definitely can't run away.
Right, the doors are locked, the restraints are tight.
Exactly. So, what does your brain actually do when your physical body is just completely, hopelessly trapped?
Well, it builds a trapdoor.
It builds a trapdoor. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are exploring a really incredibly murky diagnostic landscape.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, but so fascinating.
We're looking at a stack of sources today that pair a deeply immersive fictional narrative directly with some hard, factual science.
Which is such a unique way to look at this kind of data.
It really is. So we have excerpts from the sci-fi fantasy novel Vitae, The Awakening, and those are mapped directly onto a comprehensive research dossier.
Right, a dossier that details the real-world psychology, the neurobiology, and the philosophy of profound trauma.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to use fiction as a sort of decoder ring. We want to understand the profound mechanisms of the human mind.
Because fiction often operates as, the safest vehicle for exploring the most dangerous, overwhelming truths of the human condition.
Yeah, absolutely.
By watching a character navigate the unimaginable, we get to safely examine the underlying science of survival.
To set the stage for you all, in this novel, there's a character named Sharina, and she is a survivor of horrific captivity.
He went through a lot.
Oh, an unbelievable amount. She was held by this group known as the Inquisitors. She endured literal torture.
Bound to metal chairs, hung from chains.
Yeah, she was completely stripped of her physical agency. So we are going to explore exactly what happens to the human mind and the body when a person is subjected to that kind of extreme violation.
Because the mind is, it's the ultimate survival engine. When the body is trapped and subjected to pain, the brain has to manufacture an escape hatch.
Or else what?
Or the consciousness would simply shatter under the weight of the reality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the dossier grounds this mental escape hatch in a philosophical debate that goes back millennia.
It really does. It brings up this profound tension, like the body is self versus the body is vessel.
Right. So break that down for us. What does modern philosophy say about that?
Well, modern ethical philosophy generally frames bodily autonomy as the absolute foundation of personhood. Like, you are your body.
Okay.
And your ability to govern it, to say what happens to it, is what makes you a free agent in society.
But ancient cultures didn't really see it that way, did they?
No, not always. Early philosophical debates questioned whether violating the physical form actually damages the self.
Meaning, like the soul or the core consciousness.
Exactly, the intellect, the identity.
Uh-huh.
Or if trauma merely damages a temporary biological container, the vessel.
And in the book, Sharina adopts that ancient split as a literal, desperate survival mechanism.
She has to, right, to survive the Inquisitors.
Yeah, she essentially forces herself to view her body as totally meaningless.
Right, because her logic is that if her physical form has absolutely no inherent value, then the Inquisitors torturing her can't actually take anything of value away from her core self.
It's like, imagine being in the middle of a terrifying home invasion.
Okay, yeah.
And you convince yourself, while it's actively happening, that you don't actually own the house.
Wow.
You watch the intruders smash the windows and ruin the furniture, and you just tell yourself it's fine, it's just an empty building.
The vandalism doesn't hurt you because you don't live there.
Exactly.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the clinical term for vacating the house, so to speak, is dissociation.
Which is a term we hear a lot, but maybe don't fully grasp.
Right. When physical escape from a threat is impossible, the mind escapes the present reality by severing the connection between consciousness and physical sensation.
The mind just unplugs.
Exactly. And the dossier breaks this down into specific mechanisms that map perfectly onto Sharina's experience. Like, there is depersonalization.
What does that actually feel like, clinically?
It's this profound, really unsettling feeling of being outside of one's own body, observing the abuse almost as a detached third party.
So the brain alters its perception of the self so drastically that the person being hurt is no longer me.
Precisely. And then there's derealization too.
Right, where the external world itself feels artificial or muted or foggy.
Yeah, the brain is essentially altering the rendering of reality to make it seem like a bad dream rather than a real physical event.
Plus the emotional numbing. I mean, the dossier mentions the brain literally dampens the neural pathways to the emotional processing centers.
It has to. The pain signals might be firing from the nerves, but the brain refuses to translate those signals into emotional distress, so the whole system doesn't just overload and crash.
So Sharina survives the Inquisitors by living in that numbed, depersonalized state. She made her physical reality entirely meaningless.
She did.
But the tragedy of Sharina's philosophical escape hatch, vacating her own house, is that while her mind is somewhere else, her physical nervous system is still chained to that chair.
It's still absorbing every single ounce of the terror.
Right. So how does the physical body actually endure the trauma that the conscious mind is actively refusing to process?
Well, when a human being faces a threat, we typically think of the fight or flight response.
Sure. Adrenaline pumping, ready to run.
Right. The sympathetic nervous system flares up to help you run or fight back. But when a threat is overwhelming, vastly superior in strength, and you are physically captive.
When you can't fight and you can't flee.
Exactly. The brain initiates a third, much older, deeply primitive survival mechanism. It's called tonic immobility.
Also known as the freeze response.
Yes.
And I want to jump in here because if you're listening and you've ever judged yourself for freezing up during a crisis, or if you know someone who struggles with the shame of not fighting back during, say, an assault or a scary medical procedure, you need to hear this.
It's so important.
Freezing is not giving up. It is not a conscious choice. It is a hardwired biological reflex.
Absolutely.
I think society often misinterprets a victim freezing as consent or like apathy, which leads to this incredibly toxic, misplaced shame for the survivor.
That misunderstanding is just devastating. Tonic immobility bypasses conscious thought entirely.
So you aren't deciding to hold still.
No, your brainstem essentially hijacks your motor functions. Evolutionary biology has taught the oldest parts of our brain that struggling against a dominant predator often triggers a more lethal attack.
Like prey animals playing dead, movement triggers the predator's instinct to strike.
Exactly. So the body goes completely rigid or entirely numb just to survive the encounter.
Okay, I understand the psychological freeze, but physically, she's not just powered down, right?
Not at all.
Because if I'm cornered by a threat, my adrenaline is spiking, my heart is racing. So if she is outwardly frozen, completely still in that chair, where do all those fight or flight chemicals go?
They flood the internal system, and they have absolutely nowhere to burn off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the outward stillness is a facade. Internally, the body is raging. The Dossier details this massive chemical cascade.
Like with the amygdala, right?
Right. The amygdala, which acts as your brain's primal smoke detector, gets stuck in the on position.
Just constantly sounding the alarm.
Constantly. It creates a state of long-term hypervigilance. The brain actually starts to believe the threat is permanent.
And then the endocrine system reacts to that alarm, right, by flooding the body with cortisol, our primary stress hormone.
Yes. But here's the issue. Cortisol is designed for short bursts.
Right, to give you the energy to sprint away from danger.
Exactly. But if you are trapped and that cortisol just sits in your system for weeks or months, it becomes toxic.
Highly toxic, according to the research.
Yeah, chronic cortisol exposure literally alters the brain's architecture. It specifically attacks the hippocampus.
And what does the hippocampus do, for context?
It's the part of your brain responsible for logging memories and stamping them with a time and date. It tells your brain, hey, this terrible thing happened in the past.
Ah, so it files it away.
Right. But cortisol physically shrinks the hippocampus, impairing its ability to consolidate memories.
Which is why profound trauma doesn't feel like a memory of the past.
Exactly. It feels like it is continually happening right now. The timestamp is completely broken.
Wow. So Sharina's mind escaped, but her body became this rigid sponge, just absorbing every single drop of that chemical trauma.
Perfectly conditioning her for severe post-trauma symptoms long after she is rescued.
Which brings us to the book again, because here's where it gets really interesting and where the narrative masterfully illustrates the science.
The scene with Kurien.
Yes. So Sharina eventually escapes the Inquisitors. She is hiding out in these ruined post-apocalyptic buildings with her companion, Kurien.
They're finally somewhat safe.
Right. And she's wearing torn rags, she's covered in scars, and Kurien, who cares for her deeply, looks at her with genuine admiration.
He sees her strength.
He does. He looks at her with undeniable desire and respect, and instead of feeling complimented or safe, Sharina has a complete violent psychological breakdown.
It's a really intense moment.
She grabs a curved razor, starts frantically shaving off her own hair, and tears at her clothes to make herself look, in her words, worthless again.
Which is a profoundly shocking reaction if you only view trauma as a conscious memory of a bad event.
I genuinely struggled with this scene when I was first reading the excerpts.
It seems counterintuitive.
Completely backward. Why would a moment of safety and a simple, loving compliment triggers such a violent self-destructive reaction? You'd think she would finally relax.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of somatic memory. The Dossier emphasizes that trauma isn't just filed away as a narrative story in the prefrontal
It's
cortex.
stored in the body.
Yes, it is stored as visceral physical sensations in the body's tissues and through the autonomic nervous system.
The vagus nerve plays a big part in this, doesn't it?
Huge. The vagus nerve connects the brainstem to the major organs, and it literally remembers the physical sensations of terror. The body remembers the trauma even when the conscious mind has successfully suppressed the narrative details.
The body keeps the score. The cells are holding on to the memory of the chains, the rigidity of the freeze response, the flooding of cortisol.
Even if her conscious mind is trying to focus on being safe with Kurien.
Right.
And we really have to look at what Kurien's admiring gaze actually did psychologically. By looking at her with desire and respect, he assigned value back to her physical body.
He accidentally broke the shield.
He completely obliterated her dissociative shield.
Because remember her survival mechanism, my body is a meaningless vessel, therefore the torture meant nothing.
That was the trapdoor she built to survive. But if Kurien is right, if her body is beautiful, if it is sacred, if it has immense value, then the terrifying inverse must also be true.
If her body has value, then the things the Inquisitors did to it meant something horrific.
Exactly.
It wasn't just a home invasion of an empty house. It was her soul that they were vandalizing, her core self.
There's an anchoring quote from the text that just punches you in the gut.
Yeah, where Sharina breaks down, sobbing, and screams at him. Every time they touched me, they took something from me.
That quote perfectly captures the fracture of identity. That is the devastating realization of violation trauma.
The illusion of the meaningless vessel collapses.
It does. And the survivor is forced to confront the agonizing reality that bodily violation does, in fact, harm the core self.
And the shame she feels in that moment isn't because she did anything wrong.
No, not at all. The shame is a byproduct of that fractured identity trying to piece itself back together while her nervous system is flooded with somatic panic.
She wants to be worthless again because worthlessness was safe. Being worthless meant she couldn't be robbed.
So true.
So what does this all mean for someone trying to heal? How does a survivor actually rebuild trust in a body that feels like a crime scene?
Especially after their identity has been fractured at that deepest level.
Right, because the book doesn't just leave her in that state of breakdown, and the real-world science doesn't abandon survivors there either.
Thank goodness. Recovery requires the deliberate reclamation of bodily autonomy.
What does that look like?
It requires moving the body out of that frozen hypervigilant state and proving to the nervous system that it is capable of defense, of setting boundaries, and of owning its physical space again.
Let's look at how Kurien reacts in the narrative, because it's a beautiful metaphor for this psychological process.
It really is.
When Sharina is having this breakdown, tearing at her clothes and shaving her head, Kurien doesn't pity her.
He doesn't recoil.
No, and he doesn't try to shush her or let her wallow in that feeling of worthlessness. Instead, his deep empathy triggers his Vitae.
Which is this mystical internal power in the book's universe.
Right. The Vitae physically flows from him and reshapes her torn, ruined dress. It repairs the fabric and transforms it into this protective, emboldening leather armor.
I love that visual.
And he tells her flat out, "You are not worthless. This is not ordinary."
It is a stunning visual metaphor for external validation.
How so?
Well, survivors of captivity, assault, or profound coercion often struggle immensely to reclaim their agency. The trauma taught them, biologically and psychologically, that their agency does not exist.
Wow, yeah.
Kurien's actions provide undeniable external validation that her body is not a meaningless vessel, but a sacred space worthy of absolute protection.
He essentially redraws the boundary lines of her house and installs a heavy-duty security system.
I like that analogy.
He isn't just fixing her clothes. He's essentially installing a new physical boundary that proves her body belongs to her and only her.
Psychologically, this external validation is a crucial step in moving from violation trauma to post-traumatic growth.
Post-traumatic growth isn't about erasing the trauma.
No, or pretending it didn't happen. It's about integrating the profound horror of the experience into a new, empowered identity.
Sharina has to mourn what was taken from her, but she also has to learn how to wield her autonomy again.
Exactly. By transforming her rags into armor, Kurien is symbolically handing her back the control over her physical self.
He tells her to use the knowledge of her past to strengthen her future, to not hide from the horrific things she survived, but to let the survival itself make her impenetrable.
This raises an important question for all of us, looking outward at the real world.
What's that?
How does our society treat survivors?
Hmm.
Do we, perhaps inadvertently, reinforce their misplaced shame?
Do we look away or question why they froze?
Right. Or do we expect them to recover on a neat, linear timeline because we are uncomfortable with their somatic panic?
Or do we act like Kurien? Do we commit to protecting their worth, validating their pain without pity?
Reminding them of their inherent, undeniable value until their nervous systems are strong enough to believe it themselves?
That is the power of a deep dive like this. We took a fictional sci-fi fantasy setting, with magical Vitae and post-apocalyptic ruins.
And we used it to deeply understand the very real, very grounded neurobiology of trauma.
Cortisol flooding, the freeze response, somatic memory, and the ancient philosophical right to bodily autonomy.
We often assume science and fiction are opposites. But examining the physiological reality of trauma through the lens of a character's journey allows us to see the data with profound empathy.
And whether you know survivors of medical trauma, survivors of assault, or individuals who have endured emotional captivity, understanding the science fundamentally changes how we empathize with hidden pain. It teaches us that the body remembers what the mind forgets. It reminds us that trauma isn't just a bad memory you can talk your way out of.
It is a physiological injury.
A rewiring of the nervous system that requires profound patience, safety, and validation to heal.
The initial X-ray might be blank, but the fracture is incredibly real.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to mull over. We started by talking about the philosophy of the self, and whether we are just vessels or if our bodies are our core identities.
Right.
But if our bodies store our deepest unspoken traumas as physical sensations, if our vagus nerves, our muscle fibers, our very cells hold the memories our conscious minds refuse to look at.
Do we truly own our bodies?
Or do our bodies, with their secret somatic ledgers, silently dictate the reality of who we really are?
A profound paradox.